Okay, so we're going to be looking at the facial topology stuff we went over in class, and in this video I'm going to take you up to where we went to in class and further. But first of all, we're going to talk about what we did talk about at the beginning. What is facial topology? What is topology in general? Some of you have already done this in previous, colleges and stuff. Some of you have never heard about this stuff before. But if you've played a 3D game in the past 30 years, you would have seen it, just not necessarily knowing you've seen it. So what topology is in general, or otherwise known as edge flow. So you'll hear the term edge flow a lot. This goes between organic, hard surface, anything like that. It's the makeup of the surface, it's the polygonal makeup that makes up a asset. We did talk about this last year. Just goes into, trying to get everything in quads, avoiding triangles on curved surfaces, avoiding n-gons in general, making sure that if you are making something like a limb of a tree, something that flows, that there is a natural flow to it. Flow is the important aspect of that word, edge flow. It flows. There's a road, there's a track, there's a path that goes. We just don't make weird jaggedy geometry and try and kind of like make it okay, because it's never going to look okay. It's going to look horrible. So if you use our guy in front of us here, we'll just concentrate on the forehead for now, just to explain this kind of stuff. But if you can see, everything is pretty much regular polygons. And there is a flow to things, there is, especially here, you can see it goes up, it goes round, and it goes over to the other side, and it goes down. It goes up, it goes around, and it goes down. There's a flow to things. What there isn't a lot of are sharp right angles in organic topology anyway. When it comes to hard surface geometry, there might be some right angles that serve the surface, but we're talking about organic stuff at the minute. If we look at the face, you can just follow these on. These are all just straight lines that come out of the face, down into wherever. It's edge flow. Now, why is that? Why do we use these? Well, it's because when you're producing geometry for games, you need to make sure everything looks good, base in it. But if you've got curved surfaces, be it organic or hard surface, so I'll try and draw a good example here. So you've got something which, curves around like this. Like that. And that could be whatever. If you've got geometry which is not good, or jagged or anything like that, so, you've kind of made it with triangles and n-gons and all sorts, what you're not going to have is a nice consistent curve to something. We talked about last year how you don't need to bevel or add tons of edges to something just to make it look curved. The human brain kind of fills in the blanks. Well, this kind of goes against it. When you have uneven surfaces on something that should be a nice smooth curve, the human brain kind of latches onto it because we are pattern recognizing machines. We see negative changes in state, that kind of stuff. We notice these kind of things. So from a player point of view, there's that. But from a producer point of view, from artist, texture artist, organic, whatever, there's also a lot of background stuff. They don't render well, they don't catch light well. It might even be, if you try and take it into external softwares like ZBrush or Painter or something like that, it might even just straight up refuse. If your geometry is really bad, it might say, I can't process that, whatever. So there's that to keep in mind. So, if this is a tube, and I've kind of like made a bit of a pig's ear and it's not very nice looking, something like that, what I would actually want to be doing to make good topology on a tube, it's quite simple. What I'd be looking for is, obviously, the tube is going in this direction, so I'm going to have my edge flow go in that direction. I go, you see the squares, it goes very nicely. There's regulation between each vertex and each polygon. There's no kind of crazy, like these are really close together, but then there's big gaps, and then there's kind of like this for some reason, and then there's whatever, We want to avoid anything like that. So it's all about being clean. But when it comes to facial topology, it's super, super important because of animation. when a character talks, especially if it's a very kind of talky game, so you got a lot of like Detroit Become Human. There's a lot of cutscenes, stuff like Death Stranding and in Horizon Zero Dawn, all this kind of jazz, where you're looking at the character's face a lot. You're going to want to make sure that there's no kind of weird texture skewing or texture tearing. Now, the great thing about this is when, if you think about the eyes, when you blink, the eyes are going downwards in that direction. Basically, the polygons are either expanding or compressing linearly into each other. So perpendicular, linear, however you want to think about it, they all compress and you'll stretch in a straight line like that. But what we don't want to have is any polygons kind of do this, where when they're moving, they skew, because that's where you get texture tearing. And it's really easy to see in this example here, or in any kind of really good facial topology. So let's get rid of all this. Around the face here, we've got find the color that'll work. Around the mouth especially opens, closes. It compresses at the side. Well, when it opens, everything's moving in that direction. Everything is compressing. That's a really bad color. The other green. Everything is, expanding outwards on both ends into each other. And then when they compress, when they get brought together, or the character's lips get pursed, they travel in linearly together. And then when you blow a raspberry, you blow a kiss, you bring them all closer together. What's happening is things are coming in like this. So you see, there is this whole thing about polygons moving towards each other or away from each other in a straight line, in a linear line. Super, super important that we do that. Now, this might all seem very kind of complex and a bit scary and stuff, but it's really not. The act of producing topology is technically a very simple process, especially in Maya. It's incredibly simple. It's very enjoyable. I said in class, it's one of my favorite things to do because once you know the makeup, once you know the things we need to do, it's a very kind of like automatic process, as long as you don't get kind of like too automatic with it, and you kind of just like go autopilot and make a bunch of mistakes. It's just about filling areas in carefully and cleverly, but it's a very kind of chill process. If you're into like UVing, for me it's very much the same kind of thing. I don't have to think too much about UVing. I don't have to think too much about retopology until I need to. And I just kind of go with it. I just kind of, I get my main groups in there, I get my important elements in there, and then I just fill in the rest of the head. And of course, what I'm not expecting anyone to do is get this right off the bat, because one, when have you ever thought about this kind of stuff before? And two, it just takes practice. Even for me, I'm good at this. This is one of my most strongest things to do. One of my core skills. It still took me a while to get it, and I had to do a lot of research. Unfortunately, I wasn't taught this, so I had to kind of learn this myself, and I made a lot of mistakes. But just through researching, looking at how other people do things, looking at places where they're used, how is it used in animation, how is it used in games, all that kind of jazz. I've formed my own way of, not my own way of doing things, but I've formed my own ways of thinking about stuff. I've recognized stuff, I've gone about stuff. But what you see here is not an only me kind of way of doing things. This is a global way of doing stuff. The edge flows we'll be doing, you have to do them. The way we look at things wrapping around a body, we have to do it like that. The way that we have to think about the importance of certain shapes, we have to do that. And you'll also see me using terminology that, weirdly enough, I came up with this whole bandit mask thing in my head years ago, and we'll hear what the bandit mask thing is. I heard this bandit mask, and then I thought, oh, I'm dead clever for thinking that up. A few years later, I actually found out someone else was using it, and then I found out another person was using it, because these are just common kind of terms. So what I learned to do is a common thing across the entire industry, and it's dead easy. But this can also be taken into hard surface as well. So if, for the environment people, for them, people who want to do, you don't want to do characters, but you want to do environments, exterior, interior. Retopology is part of your process. It is part of it. You can sculpt and make really, really cool high resolution props, but if they're not game ready, how are you going to use them? And if you think of things like very ornate weapons, like flintlock pistols, or if you think of very kind of ornate things like swords, down to things like old rotary phones, or things that are a bit more kind of complex in shape, you're probably best off creating those in high resolution, in like ZBrush or something, or create create a high resolution version somewhere, Maya, Blender, whatever, and then you produce the low poly version once you have that high poly version done. So this is across the entire kind of gamut of what we do, so don't worry about it. But obviously we've got to start somewhere, so we're starting with the face, and then we'll move on to the body. The body's dead easy. So let's have a look. So as we went over in class, there are 4 main regions, and there are about 4 secondary regions of the head to think about. Now, in the first class, I did have all 4 of them. In the second class, I pulled a complete blank. But the first, the important ones, the ones we cannot get away from. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1, and this is literally the order of importance, and this is the order in which I want you to do as well. This isn't, oh, I'll do this first and I'll do this. No, do it in this order first. Number 1 is the eye mask. We call it the eye mask because it's the mask for the eyes. Easy. It's a mask for the eyes. And what I want you to do as well is ignore the edge flows on the inside of these shapes. I want you to look at the colours, the shapes of the colours. Because I'm seeing a lot of people in class making very, very small edge loops for like the eyes and the whatever we're going to look at in a second. But no. These first initial edge slopes are going to be big. We'll add the detail later on. So the eye mask, nice and big, that's basically making the shape of the optical cavity. Secondary, the bandit mask. So this is the bandit mask. Why do I call it the bandit mask? Well, it kind of looks like a bandit mask. Now this goes around the eyes. This is the one out of all 4 of these masks that is a little bit different, because we're going to start off with very specific numbers for 1, 3, and 4. For this one, we don't need to. This is the amount of edges in this is dictated by our eye mask. But what I call, there's 2 things here that I call a container. So our bandit mask is a container, and then the next one's a container. The muzzle mask, that's the blue one here. This is called I call this a container. So we've got the eye mask, which is the inside of the eye, this green area. We've got the bandit mask, which is then the outside round there. And then we've got the muzzle mask. Now, why this is a container and why the bandit mask is a container, because they contain other edge flows. So obviously the bandit mask is containing the eye mask. The muzzle mask is containing the lip mask. Okay, so we've got the eye, bandit, muzzle, and lip mask. Now, what I want you to really realize as well is with the lip mask, I don't want us to think about the actual lips being involved. It's just the area around the lips. Okay? So we're just doing that area. So eye, bandit, muzzle, lip. Those are the 4 most important parts of the face that we need to do. Once we get those in, it all kind of fits in with everything else. But there are certain numbers as well we're going to use, and when we go up to using them, we'll kind of really drilling into them. But they are 8, 12, and 16. And in Maya, I'll show you why those numbers specifically are very, very good to think about. But 8, 12, and 16, just these numbers, remember them. Oops, a daisy. There you go. Very important numbers. So we've got eye mask. That is the most important one. It's the eyes. It shapes that area around us. The bandit mask, why that's important is that helps us shape the zygomatic arch area there, as well as the cheekbone area here, as well as the top of the nose here. You see how it wraps over the nose as well. It goes like a bandit mask or a masquerade mask. It goes over the top of the nose. It traces that nasal ridge. The muzzle mask, well, that starts on the top of the nose again and comes around, traces the laugh line to the chin and then back into itself. The lip mask can basically traces all the underside. Now this one does fill in this area here and this area here, which we will eventually be doing, but really at first our lip mask is going to just be this kind of area. That's all it's going to be at first. But you will see how all these things link into each other. Now what are the secondary masks? Well, the secondary masks, some of these are really important. We do need to do them, but depending on what you're doing, you might not actually need them. If you're only doing the faceplate of someone, you don't need an ears. But we got ears. Now what is, we can't really see it here, but that is a loop which goes around the ear. and acts as a container for the ear, so you can basically pop it off and the ear is all within that one area. So there's ear mask. 6. There's a nose mask, which you kind of see here, but a nose mask is something that basically wraps around the nose, obviously, and is a container for the nose. Now, I really like this because if I have a person who I want to, a character which I would really want to pull the nose off the face and make it kind of jump out, the nose mask is really good for that. You don't always need it though, because what if one, your character doesn't have a nose, or two, you're doing something very stylized like an anime character or something where the nose is just very, very blended into the face, you don't necessarily need them. 7 is a neck mask. So the neck mask is a mask that goes around the neck, obviously. But why this is important to think about, but not vital, is it's a good way of controlling the amount of edges we send down into the body. If we're doing a nude, which we will be doing, but when we're doing nudes, we need to make sure that we're not sending too much or too little into the body below, or in some cases up into the head. So we need to make sure that we have a good number going around there. So a neck mask is good. It also it's clean geometry. You know, if you have like a nice little loop going around the neck, mimicking a choker, it means that geometry is nice and clean. And number 8, and this is where I kind of tripped up in class. This could be in many different things, to be honest. I'm going to kind of fit a few inside 8. Depending on the character, you might have something called like a face plate or a face mask, which is literally a mask which runs round, or an edge loop which runs around the entire face, like that. And it's almost acting like a mask, because it traces down the side of the head, traces the jaw around to the chin, back and up into itself like that. So that's actually the only one I can think of. I can't think of what I said in the first class. I still can't do it. So these on the right here in the light green, these are secondary. Some of these are still really important. Like, I like having a nose mask in there. I like having ear masks in there. I like having a neck mask in there, but they're not always vital. But the ones that are vital are here on the left. So eye mask, bandit mask, muzzle mask, lip mask. And we'll go in that order. And we'll talk about it as we go along as well, why it's important to stick to numbers like this. I'll show you on a piece of geometry, dead easy. And why it's important just to take your time with this. Because again, the technical process of this is dead easy. It's not a complex process. It's why and where and the shape and the control which kind of gets a bit tough. Because this is like a big jigsaw, an invisible jigsaw. The shapes are already there. We just need to find them. We need to pull them out in space. I've always said that it's very good to do puzzles, shape-based puzzles, all this kind of stuff. Things that make you think ahead, because quite a lot of this does need a kind of forward thinking ahead. If I add this in here, how is it going to affect something else? If I delete that bit, how is that going to affect it? But quite commonly what you'll hear me say as well is sometimes you just got to do it. If you have an idea, if you think you know what it's going to look like, go for it. As long as you're thinking about where that's going and how it's going to interact with stuff and might it cause problems down the line, you don't always know. So you've just got to do it. You cannot get stuck in kind of like process paralysis, choice paralysis, anything like that. You've just got to do it. But it's a very quick process as well to get the initial shapes in. And then we slow down a little bit to fill it in to make sure we're not making too much mess. And then it's done. I will warn you, the ears are an absolute pain, because if you think about ears, there's a lot of information within this small area. But gone are the days of super low poly stuff, unless you're working on that kind of game. Luckily, we're not going to be forcing ourselves to model and retopologize like that. We're modeling and retopologizing realism, so we need to have a bit more information, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But it is a good exercise. If you think about Zelda Breath of the Wild, if you think about Slime Rancher, if you think about whatever stylized games, you don't always need to have tons of information in here or whatever. So that's a bit of an overview of what we're doing. And I'll have lots of examples of edge flow and how it's used, and you can find this kind of stuff everywhere. You know, the best ones to look at are animation behind the scenes of like Pixar and stuff, DreamWorks 3D animations. See if you can see the workings of those, or even just looking at, you know, why topology is good. Literally just Google it. It makes the geometry really nice to animate. It makes it nice to go into the engine. And one of the biggest ones I realised I've not spoken about as well is, um, obviously we're sculpting a lot of detail on our models, but we can't take that into game engine because obviously if we take an 80 million point model into Unreal, it's gonna take up all our bandwidth. We won't be able to put much else in the scene. However, with a low poly surface like this, what we can do is pull that high poly information onto a normal map and other maps as well, curvatures, ambient occlusions, all this kind of stuff. We can pull that information off, and then we can give the impression that that information is there. And there are some really cool techniques I'm going to show you of how to even add even more detail. But first, all we need to do is just make a really nice model for a head. Cool. So I've provided that Barry head FBX on the VLE, and that's the one I'm going to be topologizing in here. So what I'm going to do is pause the video, come back, and we'll go through the process of getting head into the engine from ZBrush. We'll talk about the whole process of, you know, getting something that's high res through to a low poly, well, a usable state for Maya, and then the actual process. Okay, so now we are back, and we're actually just going to start to get our head into Maya. But first, how do we actually get it there? So we can't just take our sculpts as we have them into Maya or whatever we're retopologizing in. Generally, because most of the time what we're going to be doing is working on something which is going to be a high poly count with a lot of detail, maybe possibly in the mid millions, so like, you know, maybe 4, 8, 16 million, something like that. If we're doing full body stuff, it's going to be even higher. And if we're doing even full body with clothing and stuff, we won't take it all in at the same time, possibly, but we're still going to be dealing with like a lot of polygons. So what we're going to do is process the mesh so that it's easier to work within Maya. Now we're not going to change our ZBrush model, but you'll see what we're going to do. So for this case, we'll be using the Barry head that I provided for you. So how do we actually start off bringing that in? Well, it's very, very simple. What we need to do first of all is just have a project open. We can, but it's not going to be the easiest to bring it in this current current state like this. So what I want us to do first of all is just open any old project here. So I'm going to Lightbox, and I'm going to just open, let's call it Dynawax 128, because it's got a nice little Dynawax mesh to it, not mesh to it, material. Sorry, something in the background's making noise. There you go. So yeah, I've just opened this Dynawax 128 because I like the material. Now we're in the sculpting mode, so now it's going to be that easy for us. So I've downloaded the head from the VLE. I put it in a folder. So what I'm going to do is go to Z plugin, down to FBX export import, and I'm going to go to import. So there are no options we need to change in any of this. But if I go to import, obviously the import window is going to crop up, and what I'm going to do is make sure I can see this. Let's look at the recording. Yes, we can. What I'm going to do is navigate to that folder that I've made, and I've called it head topo. So when I find it, bear with us, while apparently I've lost the folder. Oh, retopo head, there you go. So in this folder I've got that FBX. So I would advise, you know, if you download it, don't just leave it in your downloads folder, put it in a folder. Now we will be making a Maya project for this anyway, because that's always good practice. Whenever you're doing anything inside Maya, it's very good practice to make a Maya project like we did last year. But I'm going to bring in that head dyna. We're reading data, and eventually our head will appear. Beautiful. So that's our lovely head right there, sculpted by yours truly. Now, currently this head is 4.1 million, so it's 4 million essentially. That's very, very dense. You know, if we turn on the wireframe for it, it's a bit of a dense head. Now, this is something to talk about as well, why retopology is very good. where are the most important parts of a character's face? Well, it's going to be the front in it. It's going to be around here, where you got the eyes, the nose, the mouth, or any kind of features. It's important. Where's least important? Well, top of the head, back of the head, some areas of the neck, maybe even some parts of within the cheeks. These are not very, very important areas, and a lot of times you also get covered up. So what we've got here is a head which is very inefficient, because around the eyes it's a kind of density, and then around the top of the head it's the exact same density. So we can add more detail in ourselves, we can add more important detail in ourselves in areas that matter. So getting this into Maya, it's a very easy process, but it's a process that we have to observe when we do this. I've got my head here, so in my subtools I've got my head, and what I'm going to do is run something called a decimation, and that's going to basically take that 4.1 million point information down to a much more manageable poly count, and I'm talking 20,000, 35,000, which is nothing. But first of all, we need to duplicate this head, because this process we're about to do is not going to make a new version, it's going to replace the subtool. So if we're not careful, we could lose possible information. And just to be safe as well, I'm going to rename this subtool. So with this subtool selected, this Dyna Head 1, I'm going to come down to where it says rename, click it, and I'm going to name it head underscore decim. Now, if you, just a bit of a ZBrush thing, if you hit caps lock, it will cancel out the renaming. So if you actually want to get capitalization inside your names, you have to hold down the shift key, as you know, those who hopefully you all know, when you're writing stuff out, if you hold shift, it does a capitalization. You don't always have to tap caps lock. Boom, there you go. So now it's called head decim. That I know that's my head Dyna, that's my head decim. So my head decim or decimation, what I'm going to do is come up to Z plugin again. I'm going to come down to decimation master. This is right here. We can ignore this options one because we've not actually got anything to do with UVs or anything. That's fine. We're going to use the second, the third, and the fourth options. The second and the third tie together. So what I'm going to do is click pre-process current, which will pre-process the subtool I've got selected. And what this does is it basically looks at the mesh, it maps it, it looks at all the detailed areas, it looks at all the flatter areas, and it starts to make decisions on what the next step is going to do. Takes a little bit of a minute. The more denser the mesh, the longer this will take. So it takes a bit of a minute. Any minute now. There we go. So reordering, and we should be finished off any second. Right into disk. There we go, done. So what it's done now is it's looked at the surface and it's made some decisions. It's not actually done anything yet though. So if we come to Z plugin again and we come to the number 3, decimate, there is a bit of a trick to reading these sliders. So this percentage of decimation is not the percentage that we're taking away. It's the percentage that we're leaving behind. It took me a little bit of time to actually get used to this when I first started using ZBrush and decimation and stuff. So when it says 20% decimation there, what it's really saying is, what is 20% of 4 million? So if I was to increase this, what you'll also see is the 2 sliders underneath, they'll adjust to basically give you an estimate of the amount of points and polygons that will be left behind. So if I put 50%, so what we've got there is 50% of this decimation will give us, the decimal point's a bit of a wrong place there. So it'll give us basically half of that amount. If 50% of this is going to be essentially 2.1 million. Or in this case, 2,073,400. Yes, it gives us a lot of things. That's not enough for us. So remember, with this decimation slider here, the lower down you go to the left, the less topology is left over. the more to the right you go, is more topologies left over. So if I go something like 1882, that's 82% of 4 million. That's not a lot of decimation. So I can click 1%. What is 1% of 4 million? Well, it's 41,000. Literally, it's we're just shifting decimal places around. 41,468,000. 41,460 polygons. Right, go. Oh, my dyslexia is kicking in there. So what we're happy with that, if we're thinking, okay, yeah, 40,000, whatever, I'm actually going to lower this to even further to 0.25%. So that'll give us 10,000 polygons. That's really decimating. So hopefully you can understand how that slider works. The less the percentage, the less geometry is left back behind. So if I've done that, what I'm going to do is pre-process current, because again, I only want to do this one subtool. So pre-process current is dead fast. There we go. So that's 10,000. You can see there that we got 10,000 and something. 10,367. But hopefully you can see what's going on. You know, we can see all these wireframe. You can see the wireframe now is all triangulated. Now this is that processing coming in to its own. You know, we're getting smaller triangles in area of greater detail and greater curvature, and bigger triangles in area of flatter surfaces where there's less detail. It's trying its best to maintain detail. So you can see there on the ear, it all gets a little bit tight and stuff, and around the eyes and around the nose, around the mouth, it gets a little bit tight. But around the back of the head, especially in the forehead there, it gets a little bit big. But what I'm going to do, so you can do that all day, you can decide whatever, but every time I do that, what I'm also doing is looking to see how much information I've lost. Now I think I could take this in as it is, but due to the fact we're pushing down that geometry further and further and further, we might be losing some detail that we actually want. So if I just Control Z back, I will do the next thing we could do. So again, you could play with them sliders all day. Underneath there, you've got these presets, which basically do the whole function 2 and function 3 thing for you. So if I go 20k, if I just press this, it's going to take a bit of time to do, but what it does is it automatically pre-processes the subtool, and it automatically assigns the decimation to it. Just takes a bit of time. Now this is good because on something like a head, you are likely to be able to afford higher resolutions, that kind of thing. But if you try and do 20k in a full body decimation, so you know we've got my big alien guy, if you do 20k on him, a 20,000 decimation on him, we're going to lose all the detail, absolutely all the detail. So you need to think about what is lost and what is maintained within this decimation, because it can only go so far. You know, if you lower your decimation so you've got 2,000 polygons in the entire head, then you're losing everything, you know. So there you go. So that's a 20,000, and it's pretty much 20,000 on a dot, I think. On the dot, 20,000. And I look at this and I think, you know, what am I losing? What am I maintaining? We do want to try and take this down as far as we possibly can to alleviate the stress on the engine, but not to a point of jeopardizing our poly count. So I'm going to do it one more time at 35,000 to show you kind of the difference. You know, for something like a head, you don't need to do 75k unless it's such a detailed head. If you're doing like a monster or something where it's a larger surface, there's actual, you know, geometric detail you want to maintain. But for a head like Barry, 20 to 35k is perfect. So we'll just see how 35k looks. Now you're going to be adding stuff to this head through Topology, so it is good to try and start as low as possible. When you'll see it obviously jump in and with a new decimation in a second. There you go. There we go. So that's nice. Now it is symmetrical technically.
but it's not actually asymmetrical. It's not truly symmetrical. There are some elements of this which it just can't seem to process actual symmetry. And this is really evident. Like around here, for instance, this isn't symmetrical, as you can tell in the middle of the forehead. The only reason I'm saying that is because this might pull up problems within Maya, maybe. Those who've had these problems in class know what I'm talking about. But it's a very small thing, so it doesn't really matter. But then, boom, that's our head. And I think, you know what, I'm going to stick with 35k. I've got all the detail that I want. You can see how the surface is now kind of broken up a little bit. I've got enough information in there I'm happy with. I could technically go lower, but in this case I'm fine with how it looks. Yeah. So 35k, awesome. 20k, just as good. But how do I actually take this out into Maya? Which is very easy. We've actually done it before. Or we've already been to the menu. So with this head selected here, this head decim, I'm going to go up to Z plugin, FBX export import, and export. Again, I don't have to change any of the settings here. I'm just going to export it. And I'm going to send it to that folder that I brought the head from. So I'm going to go navigate. I'm going to look for Retopo head. And it's head decim because that's the actual name of the subtool. It's an FBX. We're all good. So I'm going to say save. And it's going to write it. And we're good. There we go. So now we're ready to take it into ZBrush. Sorry. Ready to take it into Maya. Now we'll say, when we bring stuff into Maya, it is important that we don't do certain things inside Maya. So I'm going to import that head. I'm going to find my folder which is in Retopo head, head decim, bring it in. There you go. Boom. Now, if you make your own heads, and when you make your own heads and all that kind of jazz, what you'll find is the heads will actually be even smaller. Even smaller. They'll be really small. They might be like this scale, like little tiny little heads. Might be this scale. That's because every software has its own kind of scaling applied to it, and what might look really big inside ZBrush is actually really small inside Maya. And what we cannot do is change scale and position inside Maya, because just to show you, you know, I've got that head in there. I've just retopologized it, and I'm all happy with it. I'll export it, you know, put it back into that folder, and I'll call it head retopo. There you go. So, you know, we'll say that I've scaled the head to fit me, and I've whatever. When I come back into ZBrush, I will add a new subtool. And then on top of that subtool, I'm going to import my head. Come back. There we go. And then just bring that in. So you see how big my head is, and see how big my other heads are. So that little head on the inside there is the head I just scaled inside Maya. But if we think of it in reverse, we might have sculpted that head to be that size inside ZBrush, and then scaled it up in Maya because we feel it's too small. If that is the case, if you feel like you've got a small head inside Maya or something small that you need to change, don't change the scale in Maya. Go back to ZBrush, change the scale in ZBrush, and then re-export it back into Maya, because we cannot change the scale inside Maya because it is all taken over into ZBrush. If we change the position, same thing's going to happen. This head is now going to be above our original head, and we obviously want everything to be in the exact same position. So just whatever, you know, just don't do that. So whatever you import into Maya, if you think it's too small, go back into ZBrush, scale it up, or move it if you need to, and then re-export it. But this is our head here, so I'm just going to turn off the grid because I don't really need it. Now it does come in this really horrible bright color. So what I'm going to do is just select it, go to Attributes Editor here. Off on the right hand side, we should all know where the Attributes Editor is, and I'm going to find the head decim NCL1. Basically the material that's applied to it. What I want to do is just lower that color to make it a bit darker. like that. That's what I want. Not that dark, obviously. Just because it's a lot easier, you know, if we've got this very, very bright material, it can be hard to see features. So I'm just going to lower the opacity. Oh, not the opacity, sorry, the brightness. So our head's in there. It's head decim. You can see there it's all broken up. It's all good. Now we're about to get into retopology, but we need to just set up our head a little bit. So now that we're in, I can close my attributes editor. I don't need that at all. There's a little bit of setup we need to do. Number one, we need to make sure that this is what we call a live object or a live surface, this head, because we're essentially going to be sticking new geometry on it. We're going to be magnetizing new geometry to it. But it doesn't work if we don't make it a live surface, and this is very, very easy to do. So with our head selected, I'm going to go up here to the top menu, and I'm going to come to this magnet here. To the right of it, it should say no live surface. With this selected, we click the little magnet, and then it says blue head decim. That means that this is now a live surface, and you know you've done it right if you can't select it. Look at that, I can't select this head. The only way I can select it is if going into the outliner and actually clicking it directly. But you can also see that it's darker green. This is telling me it's a live object, and that's good. So now I can actually close my outliner. So I can click on it. And the second thing we need to do before we start off is make sure that symmetry object X is turned on. Because that means that when I do something on this side of the head, it's going to also happen on this side of the head. That's just really useful. You know, we're working symmetrically. Barry is symmetrical. We might as well utilize that symmetry for ourselves. So, making sure that the head is live. You know, if we just go through that again as a second setup, you know, make sure we have the head selected, and then we click the little magnet up here. It turns it into a live surface. You can see there it says head decim. That means that that head is now a live surface, and I'm turning on object X symmetry. Boom. Now we're ready to go. Okay, so before we actually start getting in retopologizing, there's one last thing. And you heard me go on about it in class, and those who weren't there, please really pay attention to this one. I do have a method when I approach things like this, eyes, mouth, anything which are inherently, you know, regular objects, you know, eyes are, or eyelids I should say, do go round in a shape like that, you know. We want to stay even. We want to stay equal whenever we're doing this. So we can't just be adding edges willy-nilly. When we first start off, start nice, start clean, start big, and start equal. So with an eyeball, for instance, eyelids, for instance, we have an upper eyelid and a lower eyelid. So why don't we treat them both as halves? So you'll always hear me say half, 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 that kind of thing. So with the eye right here, where I start off with is separating my lower and upper eyelid, so half and half. That's my first one, right across the middle, half. So upper eyelid, lower eyelid. Now, half of the upper eyelid and lower eyelid, down the middle. And then we have half again, so then we have half and half. And I'll do this in other objects, in other areas, like the mouth, the nose, lips, anything where I'm going in a loop going round. I'll try and get half, 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 as you'll hear me always say. It's really important that we try and get this kind of thing in our head. And don't go overboard with the topology as well. Don't go overboard with adding tons of edges in. This is where 8, 12, and 16 are really important. So I'm going to write those on the screen, and hopefully they're going to stay there for a while. So 8, 12, and 16. Those are really, really important numbers when we're doing this. At least, you know, I found them very important. And I'll show you why. So, why those are really important when it comes to anything that's round. Okay. Why is it? Oh, that's because I just unmask this. There we go. And I'll just do this again. So, but right. So this is our cylinder. Now this is 20. 20 does come into this number setup, but it's a little bit too high. But 20, what's happening here? What's happening? We've got that halfway point going down the middle, and we've got that halfway point going around the center. Half and then half. The subdivisions going down the quarters in here and here and here and here don't really matter that much. But if I have this and I start to decrease the poly count, Now we're at 19, 18, 17, 16. 16 again, half vertically, half horizontally. That's our half horizontally across the eye and half vertical across the eye. Go down again. The next one is 12. Half horizontal, half vertical. We do it again. The next one is 8. Half vertical, half horizontal. Really, really important, because when we set these numbers up, they all have this really amazing way of just linking up with each other really nicely, because we're not dealing with weird number distributions between each kind of component. I'm sure there's some fancy mathematical kind of formula that you can explain why this would happen. But this just comes out of practice. This comes out of just me doing this for years. And I cannot describe how many things I've retopologized in my life. Characters, inanimate objects, all that kind of jazz. I've done this a lot. And I always fall back on these numbers. So, we've got our head made into a live surface. We've set the object X symmetry. Now, if we open up our modeling toolkit, which is a little hammer and cube at the top there. Oh, I'm going to move my head to the side because I'm actually blocking it. There we go. So here, in this menu set, we've got Quad Draw, which is right here at the bottom right. Quad Draw. And this is what we're going to use. So click that. Some of the options change underneath it. We're not going to really worry about those too much, but I will point out that there is a nice little hotkey drop down underneath. But what's happening here? So Quad Draw allows us to, on the surface, pin vertexes. So all I'm doing there is just clicking on the surface. So that's my other hand right there. Boop, 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 boop. I'm clicking on the surface and, oh, look at that. Both sides are getting the exact same vertex distribution. And I'm also pinning to the surface. You see how they're not just floating in space, they're actually on the surface. So we're actually putting down, these little green dots are vertexes. I'm putting down vertexes. We can click and move these around as well. So I can put down vertexes, then move them into place. Especially if, you know, we want to be regular, we want to make sure everything's regulated, even distribution as much as we can. So right there, put down these 9 dots. Super awesome. Now there are 4 polygons inside there that we just don't see just yet. But if I hold shift, what I get is a preview of what I can do. As I move around, you'll see this kind of try and connect it to the closest vertexes. Now this isn't actually creating vertexes just yet. It's giving us a preview, and that's just me holding shift. That's all I'm doing. And then when I'm happy, so I'm like, oh yeah, I want to put a vertex there. I want to put a polygon there. Click. Now we've got a polygon. It's bright blue because that's what this quad draw thing does when we're in quad draw, so we can actually see our geometry. You can change that color and all that, but I'm not going to bother doing that in here just yet. So what I can do is keep holding click, 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 and I've made geometry. I've made some polygons on the head. I can move these around, so I can move that polygon around. If I hover over the edge, I can move the edge around. If I hover over the vertex, I can move the vertex around. Very, very cool. If I hold tab, which is, you know, the 2 little arrows facing that way on the keyboard, you'll see that the, not that, there you go, quad draw, so I'm back in. So if you do end up deselecting your quad draw, just click quad draw, boom, go back into it. So if I hold control, sorry, not control, tab, if I hold tab, you'll see it says extrude and the line is green, and what I can do is actually extend new geometry off the edges like that. And if 2 edges get close enough to each other, what they'll do is snap together like that, so it becomes one piece of geometry. Which is super, super good. So again, holding tab, I can just keep, and I can even do things like make little corners like that. There we go. So I've got like a little corner I'm making there, so I can have this come round like this. And then see, we've got this little block here. So I've got this little space for a quad. Hold shift, fill it in. Hey, look at that. Put a point in. Hold shift, fill it in. Start bringing around some geometry. Look at that. So you're very, very quickly able to create geometry. Now, if I want to take anything away, Control and Shift, you'll see that when I hold Control and Shift, it gets like this little yellow preview of anything, be it an edge or a face. And what I can do is actually delete that face. Boom. Click and hold and drag, I can delete multiple faces. If I hold Control and Shift over an edge, you'll see the kind of highlights this yellow edge going around. I'll delete that entire group of edges. So that's just Control and Shift. I can delete ones. And I can also delete vertexes that might be floating in space. So if I put some polygons down, some vertexes, sorry, I keep calling them polygons. Control Shift, I can click and get rid of them. Very, very cool. Now what I can also do is relax the geometry. So if I hold Shift, just Shift on its own, I can actually click and relax the geometry. Now this is nice, however it can be a little bit destructive. We are at a point in our geometry where we need to make sure that we're maintaining any shapes. So if we're drawing topology over a certain area, we want to make sure it's nice and clean and nice and sharp or whatever. We can't be over smoothing, so it kind of like it does, it collapses in on itself. I have a technique that I'll be talking about when we come up to that. But this, by default, is set to auto lock. You can see on the right hand side here, it says relax. It says auto lock. It means if I click on an internal vertex, it will only do the internals. If I click on the externals, it'll only do the externals. So that's all good. That's all nicey good. So I'll just get rid of that geometry altogether. So let's actually do some stuff. Let's start off by doing some topology. Now remember what I said, half, 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 half. And I'm going to start off by doing the inside of the eyelids first, and then the outside of the eye, well, the inside of the eye mask first, and then the outside. So in the tear duct, put a point there. On the outside of the eye, put a point there. We'll see that we're getting both on both sides because of that symmetry. So that's our halfway point. Now let's do the halfway point at the top of the eye, top, and the bottom, bottom. That's the halfway point, half, then half. Now let's do one more. The halfway point here, halfway point here, halfway point here, and halfway point here. So that's giving us 8 edges, like 8 edges at the top and 8 edges at the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is do the outside. So I'm going to make this loop because currently I've got nothing I can actually, I'm holding Shift there. I've got no polygons to create. So what I'm going to do is create the outside just using the exact same technique. So I'm going to create somewhere around here, about where the glasses sit on the nose. I'm going to put a point that's in line with the tear duct. On the outside here, in line with the corner of the eye, I'm going to put a point about there, about where the zygomatic arch is. Luckily, Barry's a bit sharp and bony in places. And then I'm going to put one at the very top, in the middle. That's going to be basically the top of the orbital socket, where the eyebrow is. I'm going to put one at the bottom. That's going to be where the cheekbone is at the bottom. And then, again, half and half. So one there, one there, one there, and one there. In like as evenly distributed as we can make it round the surface. And I can start filling them in. So if I hold in Shift, starting from there, I can click, 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 whoops, click, 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 click. There you go. Nice. So boom, we've already made an edge loop. We've already made an edge loop. We're already a lot of the way there. Now, obviously, I keep talking about regulation. I will keep talking about regulation. It's all about making sure that our polygons aren't just, grouped together, and that they're radiating out from an area. We're not just going straight up or anything. We're not just going straight up like that. Because you've got to think about this as a circle. If this is the point in the middle, things are going to radiate out from this point. Now, we've got 4 edges at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 edges at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice and even. I'm not going to start adding any internal geometry. I'll show you how to do that in a bit, but I'm not going to do it just yet. Actually, no, I'm going to show you right now. What I'm going to do, though, is on this section alone, I'm going to add another 2 vertexes on the left-hand side, another 2 vertexes on the right-hand side. Sorry, edges, not vertexes. So, that's because this is a very fast corner where you get the bottom of the tear duct going into the top of the tear duct. It's a very fast corner, meaning that it's not just smooth. It's a very sharp corner, and the same for the outside of the eye. From here to here, it's very quick, and from here to here, it's very quick. So what I'm going to do is halfway here, for instance, I'm going to hold Control. So that's me just holding Control, and I'm going to click to add a new edge in. Boom, and I'm going to do the exact same thing underneath it. Again, keeping it nice and even. And then on the inside of the tear duct here. Boom and boom. And what you'll see is the geometry does magnetize to the surface. So what we've got there now is 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the bottom. Now that I've done that, I'm going to just go in and regulate off those edges. Again, try and keep it as evenly spaced. Now the reason I did that, again, they're quick edges, they're fast edges. It's a quick little corner that. Because of that, the geometry can get a little bit kind of low res, scrappy in the corners. So I want to give myself a little bit of information there. But if you're just taking what I'm doing, you'll be cool. So I'm evenly distributing as much as I can to make that. So you can see there, right there. So that's my eye mask is done. For now, my eye mask is done. I could bring this up a little bit here, bring this up a little bit there, bring this down a little bit here. You know, I could do a load of different things. Obviously, on the opposite side of the screen here, I have got my reference. I just want to keep it off the space for now, but I'll be bringing him in when we need him. So, something like that. There you go. But I'm maintaining that halfway point. I'm not moving this down or up. This is in the middle of my eye. This is my tear duct. Anything above this is the upper eyelid. Anything below it is a lower eyelid. Same for the outside of the eye here. Anything below it, lower eyelid. Anything above it, upper eyelid. So if we bring in our head here, so we've done the eye mask. We're going to make these internal loops, you know, at some point. But before we move on to the bandit mask, I'm going to fill in this nose section because that helps us fill in that bandit mask easy. And this is very, very easy. So I'm just going to use that extend. So I'm going to hold tab. And where my halfway point on my tear duct is, I'm going to go for the one above it. I'm going to drag it into the center. Like that. And it might fight to snap in, but we're just going to have to drag it in like that. So I'll do that again. Just holding tab. I'm going to drag it into the center until one of the points meet. Like that. There we go. And then I just drag in the rest of it. There we go. So now they're connected. And then the halfway point, I'm going to do the one underneath it and then do the exact same thing. Drag it in and just make sure that's all one kind of solid group. Like that. Now this is where it's important to think about it going over the nose like this. Currently this is going a little bit too low down for me. So I actually want to move these up. Like that. So it's going up and over the nose. Like that. And I might even just move that bit up a tiny bit. Like that. Cool. So now what I've done is I've created that bridge between both the eye masks. There is no bridge mask. You can see that was grey. There is no bridge mask. Well, there is technically, but we don't need to think about it. The only thing I'm going to do here is just add, holding control, I'm going to add an edge in the middle of this new face, like that. And all that is doing for me is just keeping the polygons roughly in the same kind of density, but also giving me enough in geometry to just wrap around the nose, just a little bit for now. Just like with anything we've done so far, we can't say if something is perfect at the beginning. We need to add more information in, fill the geometry a bit more until we can say, okay, that needs a bit more work. So if we just kind of try and keep it neat and, you know, regulated, we should be good. Right, cool. So now we're going to make the bandit mask. Now this is the easiest mask to make because it goes all the way around both the eye mask and this little bridge we've just made. All we've got to do is on our right hand side here where we've got the extend. So if we come to extend, click the little arrow, we're going to get extend border. And that's what we want to change it to, extend border. If I hold tab now, you're going to see that that green line is going all the way around. And quite simply, I just click and drag out. Whoop, look at that, bandit mask made. That's as simple as it is. Dead easy. So that's just making the extend set to border. Obviously making sure that you've bridged across the nose, and when you extend out, you're done. That's it. No need to make it hard for yourself. And then just spend a bit of time just regulating out, again, thinking about things radiating out from the face. What we don't want to have is anything like that or anything like kind of that. That's not what we want. We want it radiating out naturally. Okay. So we might as well do a save now. I've not done a save yet. Now, what I've not done actually, and this is, I've just realised I've not done it. I've not made a project. I've not made a project to work on. This is very bad housekeeping. So let's just make that file, project window, let's make that project. So I'm going to call this head retopo. Head retopo. Oh, I've done the thing I always do. Retopo. Yep, there you go. Except, there we go. So now we've made the project for it, and then it should be able to, if I go to File, Save As, it should take us to the Scenes folder. Cool. So I'm going to call this Head 01. I should have really made that project at the beginning, because that's where I can also put the Barry FBX decim that I exported out. But anyway, so I've got my head right there. This is cool. It's still low poly. We're going to be adding edges into this eventually, but we want to keep it nice and low poly for now. So you can also see why they call it the bandit mask. Next up, it's the muzzle mask. Really easy again. We're going to go half, 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 as we did with the other ones. However, this one is in the middle of the face, perfectly in the middle. So each eye is obviously, you got two eyes either side of the head. This one's in the middle of the head. So what we're going to do at first is when we click and add our center at the top, we're just going to click and drag it in until it becomes one vertex in the middle. Just like with the eye, I'm going to do the internal loop first, and then I'm going to do the external loop. So I'm going to get my nose about there, and then I'm going to my chin about there, middle of my chin. Big important one, where will the halfway point be on this one? Well, it's going to be in the middle of the mouth there. So this point here, halfway, is got to be in line with the mouth there. Because I want this, at first, I want the same amount of edges on the top section here than I have in the bottom section. So what I'm going to do is find the halfway point here, half, halfway point here, half, halfway point here, halfway point there, halfway point there, and halfway point there. The only big difference we've done here is we've added an extra step of halves, whereas we only did 8 edges round the eye at the beginning. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on both sides, giving us 16. Now what I'm doing here is obviously the nose there is on the top of the nose. The next one is kind of in the corner of the nose. Next one's just on the side of it. Next one is halfway down. Next one is the middle one is in line with the mouth, and then we basically, equidistance the ones underneath it. And what I'll do is fill in the outside loops exact same way. So half, 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 and then half again, half again, half again, half again, half again. So now we should have 16 dots going around the inside, 16 dots going around the outside, and we just fill them in the same way we did before. So holding shift, we click, 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 click. Now here, around the nose is always going to be a tricky point because it's going to want to, I can get it there. If I move around, you can see how it's jumping around. I can move my camera to a position where it might just bias that. So boom, right there. This is always going to be a bit of a tricky bit because you can see how it just doesn't want to grab it. We just can't. Even if I move my camera around, I can't seem to get the middle of the nose to fill in. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just delete the 2 points in the middle of the nose at top and literally just use the extend. If I set that back to edge, I'm going to use the extend and extend it to the middle instead, like that, making sure it is all one mesh. Beautiful. And there's something cool that's happening at the minute, which I'm going to talk to after I've done the lip mask, because it kind of ties in with the lip mask as well. So halfway point, remember that one needs to be in line with the mouth. Next up, it's the lip mask, so this is the area around the lips. But I'm going to do this the exact same way with the exact same amount of subdivisions as I've done with points as I've done with the muzzle mask. So I go corner, well, middle. So that's the top of the cupid's bow and the bottom of the bottom lip, and then the corner of the mouth, and then the halfway point, and then the halfway point again, like that. And then I'm going to map them out on the outside. So remember, we don't, for the lip mask, though it says a lip mask, we're not actually going to make the lips in this. But I'm going to go on the outside, corner of the mouth, halfway, 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 halfway. Beautiful. And again, we're just going to fill that in. So holding shift, click, and you can even click and hold shift and carefully move around. It might not always do it, but you can There you go. Oh, you see. There we go. That's what I want. And again, we just need to regulate that out to make sure that all the edges are, moving smoothly across the face. So I said there was something really cool being set up. I think it's very cool. I've used 8 going around the eyes that I turned into 12 by adding the 2 edges on the inside of the eye and the outside of the eye. And then we've done 16 going around the muzzle, and we've got 16 going around the mouth. Well, what's happening here? It's so important that we have that halfway point maintained on both the lip and the muzzle mask. Because that means that we've got the exact same amount of edges underneath. If we've got 16 going around the mouth and 16 going around the muzzle, well, we should have the exact same amount going around the bottom there. Boom, I could already fill that in. Now, if I'm not doing that at the beginning, at least what I'm going to be doing is looking at the polygons, and yes, that's my halfway point. The next one down on both of them should be basically pointing towards each other. And then these two pointing towards each other. These two pointing towards each other. That one pointing towards each other. And there's a couple up here that we can do it as well. So these 2 points here kind of pointing towards each other. These 2 there kind of pointing towards each other. But I'm going to fill in these guys at the bottom. So holding shift, click and drag, I can fill those in. I'm already starting to fill some of this geometry in. And then we've got up here, we've kind of got the same thing happening. Obviously, you've got the edge going down the middle. That runs into the nose. We can skip this one, and then this one here. This edge is running into this one. Skip this one, and then this edge is running into this edge. So we're already starting to set up those paths, those edge flows, those roads into each other. And this is that forward thinking I was telling you about. What I'm doing to help myself is I'm almost trying to visualize how these paths are going to run into each other. If I get my little pen here, that path is running to there. That path running to there. Obviously the nose is running to there, which just means I just need to add edges there and there, and all that's kind of flown into each other. In here, obviously we've set up the flows down here in the lips. We've got that one working. That's a rubbish colour for that. There we go. We've got that one working. We've got that one working. We've got that one working, and that one, because those are always, those are the same amount of edges here than there are down there. That's an easy one. But here we've got this edge, which is looking like it's running to there. This edge, which is looking like it's going to run into there, which then runs into there. This one that comes down, now this one will do a bit of a whoop like that, which means that one's going to come down into there. So then we have to, we're starting to kind of like create these paths. But for now, I'm going to leave it like that and do a save. There we go. Always be saving. ABS, always be saving. Now in the first half of the video here, I'm going to finish off here. Save this because this video is already, nearly an hour now. Well, we're an hour and 10, so I'm going to finish off the video here. The second video, we're going to go from here, we're going to make the cranium, and then the third video, we're going to fill in most of the rest of the head, as well as adding in a few more bits. So see you in the next one.